Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the biggest, most hotly debated questions around universal basic income. It's this deep-seated fear that, if you just give people money for free, they'll all just stop working.
And this quote from a recent German political debate just nails that fear perfectly. It's the core anxiety that giving people unconditional money will somehow cheapen the value of work and, maybe even unravel the whole social fabric.
I mean, on the surface, it feels like straight up common sense, right? But is this whole fear of widespread laziness actually based on solid evidence? Or is it just one of those things we've all kind of accepted without really questioning it? Let's dig in. Okay, so first up, let's really unpack this classic laziness argument. What are people actually saying when they warn against giving out money with no strings attached?
Well, a lot of the time, it gets framed with this really powerful metaphor. You've got the hardworking, responsible neighbor on one side doing their part. And on the other, you've got this self-interested person who, if you give them the chance, is just going to kick back and live off that neighbor's hard work. It's a simple picture, and boy, is it effective.
And hey, this idea isn't just coming from politicians. We're talking about hugely influential philosophers like John Rawls, who basically argued it's just not fair for able-bodied people to choose to live off everyone else's labor. And that image, the Malibu surfer, has become the go-to poster child for this whole argument.
But here is where it gets super interesting. This entire thesis, this idea that people will just stop working if they don't have to, it's almost never actually backed up with historical facts or scientific studies. It's treated like an axiom, like it's just so obviously true that it doesn't even need proof.
So, if it's not really based on hard evidence, then where did this incredibly powerful link between work, virtue, and laziness actually come from? Let's do a little digging into the history.
You might be surprised to learn that thinking of laziness as a moral failing is a pretty modern idea. Way back in ancient times, work was just what you did to survive. It wasn't some grand virtue. Then later, you see thinkers split. Some praised the working class, while others actually championed a right to be lazy. And all of that leads us right up to today, where we have this bizarre double standard. If you're rich, leisure is a status symbol. If you're poor, it's a character flaw.
And this forces us to ask a really fundamental question. A lot of these attitudes about work and laziness are tangled up in old religious and cultural traditions. So should those old ideas really be the bedrock for economic policy in the 21st century? To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to challenge this simple idea of work versus laziness. What if? What if we're not even defining laziness correctly in the first place? Okay, let's break it down. Laziness isn't just leisure. That's just time you're not working. And it's not just doing nothing either. In fact, psychological studies show that most mentally healthy people would rather be doing something, even if there's no reward for it. So maybe real laziness is something more like pure idleness, or maybe it's an inability to see that you have a duty to others. Now, to help wrap our heads around this, the philosopher Philippe Van Parijs came up with this awesome model. He said, let's imagine two kinds of people. You've got the lazies, who value their free time and doing work they actually enjoy. And then you have the crazies, who are all about maximizing their income and prestige, even if it means working longer hours at jobs they hate.
And this just brilliantly highlights the problem with this whole debate. Our society tends to put the crazies on a pedestal. The hustle culture, always grinding for more. But when you really look at it, what's motivating them? It's egoistic consumption. And that's not necessarily some noble, ethically superior goal compared to wanting a life with more balance and meaning.
Okay, so all of this brings us to the main event, a completely new way of thinking about our responsibility to society, one that has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. The big idea is this: we all have a moral duty to work. But wait, this isn't about needing a job to pay your rent. It's about an inner moral commitment that every single one of us has to participate and contribute to society, no matter what our bank account looks like. The whole idea is built on something really simple. None of us are living in a bubble. We're all part of this huge interconnected web. Unlike Robinson Crusoe, who had to build everything for himself on his island, we are constantly using things that other people made possible. The roads we drive on, the streetlights that keep us safe, the hospitals we go to when we're sick. We are all consuming these public goods all the time. A perfect way to think about this is the classic rentier. That's someone who is wealthy enough to live entirely off their investments or inheritance. They don't have to work, but they still enjoy all the benefits of a functioning society. Now, you might say, well, they pay taxes, but so do the poorest people in society who also contribute their actual labor. So from this perspective, the rentier is consuming a ton of social resources without actually producing anything in return.
So here we are at the critical point. This entire way of thinking moves the conversation away from tying your contribution only to what's on your paycheck.
It really just boils down to a matter of fairness. If you're benefiting from the community, if you're using the roads and the parks and the schools, then you have a moral duty to give something back. It's not about being forced to work just to survive. It's about holding up your end of the social bargain.
And this is the most radical part of it all, this duty. It applies to everybody. The Malibu surfer on UBI, the wealthy rentier living off a trust fund, and the hardworking neighbor, they all have the exact same moral obligation to contribute. How much money you have doesn't change a thing.
So, at the end of the day, maybe the whole debate about UBI and laziness has been a distraction. Maybe it's forcing us to ask a much bigger, much more important question. What do we, as a society, actually consider a valuable contribution? And what does a truly fair and just social order even look like?
So we'll leave you with that to chew on. This takes that massive social question and makes it really personal. If our worth isn't just about the job we do for money, then what is each of us bringing to the table? What's your contribution?